A jagged shard of shrapnel has torn a red crescent into his flank, and though the cut must burn like a brand, his tail still thumps weakly against the litter. The rhythm is absurdly hopeful, the same beat he used to greet us after patrols that smelled of cordite and fatigue. The med-evac helicopter snarls in on twin rotors, chewing the sky, coughing grit in every direction. When its downdraft hits, the desert lifts, as if trying to flee into the air. Sand hisses across the asphalt and pings against the armor plating behind me. Voices muffled by engine roar, trade-clipped commands, blood type, vitals, destination, while someone chalks a big red cross across Ranger's bandage, a crude badge that insists he matters. A door gunner leans out, scanning for threats we cannot see beyond the dust. For a heartbeat, I consider asking for a seat myself, just to trail the dog and make sure the promise of care on the other end is more than a line in a logbook. Instead, I help lift him. 30 pounds of muddy fur and fragile courage lie heavier than any rucksack I have ever thrown over my shoulders. He trusts the hands that cradle him, jaws half open, pink tongue lolling. I whisper, "Hold on, buddy," so close my breath ruffles the fur atop his skull, and then he is sliding into the waiting cradle, tail flicking plywood. The crew chief taps the ramp twice. The bay door hisses shut. Turbine whine flares to a scream that pushes the memory of his eyes deep into my chest. Dust swallows the bird, and within seconds the sky is empty again. I am left staring at a space that was just occupied by the one creature in this war zone who never carried a weapon or a grudge. A ridiculous thought ambushes me. What if Ranger goes home only to find the rest of us following days later in black nylon, tagged and iced? The image blooms uninvited, body bags lined like closed envelopes, each enclosing a story that will never be read. I grind a boot heel into the ground until grit squeals, fighting back the gravity of that picture. Across the compound, Corporal Diaz ducks out of the motor pool, palms greasy, eyebrows gray with dirt. "Dog's got better transportation than brass," he jokes, voice pitched louder than necessary. A laugh would help, but all I manage is a stiff shrug. We both know every scrap of hope is a tactical resource. Seeing Ranger lifted out felt like mailing a piece of ourselves toward safety, and resources are thin. The sun droops, turning the guard towers into stark silhouettes. Lieutenant Harrington calls a convoy brief beside a HMMWV hood lit by chem lights taped into an X. He stabs a gloved finger at the map, an unpaved artery nicknamed Ambush Alley, famous for disappearing convoys the way a magician palms coins. "Bird assets are tied up," he says. "Too many civilians bleeding south of us. We roll at 1930, 8 trucks, keep spacing tight." I study the route line, rusty red against tan paper. It leads past Waddies, over a culvert I already distrust, and finally threads into the hills where the enemy writes its own laws. Before we mount up, an EOD tech trots over, sweat carving trails through beige dust on his cheeks. The rotors from Ranger's evac kicked up a slice of earth just outside the wire and exposed 3 anti-tank mines, discs stamped with Cyrillic letters. He's planting orange flags around them now. They flap like tiny surrender banners in the dying light. One careless tire on exfil, and the obituary column grows. I memorize the coordinates, fold them into the mental map that already feels overloaded with possible endings. Engines catch, coughing diesel into the wind. I circle the outer perimeter once more, rifle slung, trying to taste any shift in the air, mortar whisper, loose rock tumble, the particular quiet that precedes trouble. Nothing moves beyond the shimmer of heat. Ranger's absence sits beside me, a phantom weight. I picture him somewhere in a sterile crate, anesthetic fog creeping into his veins while a veterinarian traces fingers over stitches. Maybe he's dreaming of spoiled MRE beef or the tennis ball Diaz carved from spare rubber. The thought steadies my breathing. Harrington's voice crackles in my headset. Mount up. Our convoy rumbles forward, blacked out, relying on NVGs and muscle memory. Rubber meets sand in a hiss, like a lit fuse. The base recedes behind us until its lights are pinpricks swallowed by the dark, and suddenly the entire war feels balanced on our headlights. The world shrunk to a ribbon of road and the secrets it keeps. I climb into the turret, body aligning with the steel cage like bone into socket, and let the gun's cold grip settle against my palms. There is comfort in the mechanics, the click of the charging handle, the measured sweep of the barrel across horizon, the hum of the night vision optic. Inside the truck, Diaz mutters a prayer he thinks no one hears. I add an amen, silent. 20 minutes out, moonlight silver plates the culvert walls, and every shadow seems carved with intent. We crawl single file, engines throttled low, and somewhere above a barn owl screeches, its call sharp as a misfired flare. My pulse ticks in sync with the rotation of the turret. A lone goat emerges, clanging a bell that echoes through the pass. It looks almost amused at our caution before vanishing into brush. I imagine Ranger would have trotted after it, half curious, half hungry, tail wagging at the sheer fact of another living thing. We clear the choke point and the lead vehicle radios and all clear just as a distant thump rolls over us, soft but unmistakable. The rear truck replies too slowly. Static bleeds into the channel, and in my headset, I hear the thin edge of fear slice the driver's voice. No one says what we all know. Someone has just tossed a stone into still water, and the ripples are headed our way. The convoy presses on, engines now a chorus of uneasy hearts. I flex stiff fingers against the trigger guard, stealing a glance at the empty passenger seat where Ranger used to sprawl on short hops. He'd drop his head in my lap and sigh, as if the war were a bad dream we would wake from together. I'd tell myself he's still doing his job, only tonight he's scouting the sky, marking our names in whatever ledger angels keep for lost soldiers and broken dogs. And I remind myself that promises, once spoken, even half-muttered to a mutt whose ears never missed a secret, carry their own gravity. They pull you forward, mile by mile, heartbeat by heartbeat, toward whatever ground still waits to be won. Night presses close, thicker than the ballistic glass in front of me, and every bump in the road seems to tilt the whole desert on its axis. The convoy has been rolling 37 minutes, engine heat radiating up through my boots, when the hiss of the radio twists into a shape that does not belong. 2 letters in our authentication code arrive reversed, an almost imperceptible stutter in the phonetic alphabet. Yet the effect is electric. Lieutenant Harrington snaps an order for immediate silence, but the damage is done. Whoever sits on the other end has fingered our frequency like a thief testing doorknobs. The trucks keep time by vibration. I feel every piston stroke through the turret ring. Dust funnels through the hatch and settles against my gums with the taste of old coins. Below, Diaz grips the wheel so hard that the veins on his forearms stand like map lines. He mutters the same 4 words. Keep eyes, until they sound like a mantra, straining to become prayer. I catch my own reflection in a cracked side mirror, goggled, bandanaed, faceless, as though war insists on erasing features before it erases lives. We nose into a narrow culvert, walls looming on both sides, the overhead sliver of sky bruised purple. Tall grass strokes the fenders, and somewhere above us, a single owl shrieks, its call bouncing along concrete like a ricochet. The lid vehicle's red lamps burn halos in the dust. All I can think of is Ranger's wagging tail, still beating somewhere inside a clean clinic, light years from this choke point. The absurdity feels like a life raft, small, fragile, but floating. Clearing the culvert offers no relief. The road merely kinks left and begins climbing a ridge studded with sandstone teeth. Then, without warning, silence shatters. A bloom of fire erupts behind us, bright enough to carve shadows into the night. The last HMWV jumps, crumples, and spits debris in a lazy arc. The sound lags the sight by half a heartbeat, then slams through the convoy, a rolling concussion that punches my chest plate. Harrington's voice cracks over the net, razor sharp. Contact rear! Halt! Dismount! Cover! I swing the turret 180 degrees, palms slipping on the grips. Flames gutter from twisted steel. Silhouettes stumble in the glare. I count 3 survivors moving under their own power. One crumpled figure partially pinned by a door. Diesel fumes mix with the unmistakable copper tang of blood. My trigger finger twitches for permission it hasn't yet been granted. Diaz and I vault from the truck at the same moment. The ground greets my knees hard enough to jar my spine. A whirl of hot shrapnel jingles as it cools in the sand. Together, we sprint toward the wreckage, boots thudding in sync, rifle muzzles painting nervous arcs. A medic appears from somewhere, sliding in behind us with a bag that rattles morphine ampules like dice. One soldier's helmet burns where a chunk of phosphorus lodged. Diaz smothers the flare with his bare hands, skin sizzling, curses bitten off behind clenched teeth. The smell is unforgettable, a mix of melted polymer and scorched flesh that will hitchhike on memory long after soap and time try to scrub it away. Then the radio pops again. 3 short clicks, the coded signal for friendly approaching. But it echoes from 3 different vectors, each one slightly out of sync. The pattern is too neat, too confident. My stomach knots. Somebody is puppeteering our own language to hurt us. Harrington barks to remount, drag the wounded, abandon the dead for retrieval later. We obey because hesitating here would be choosing to die righteous instead of live, unfinished. As we shove stretchers into cargo beds, I spot a charred teddy bear on the ground, fur burnt to wire brush, one plastic eye melted into a droplet. Instinct makes me pocket it. Later, I will wonder whether I wanted to save the bear or spare myself the sight of something innocent stained by proximity. Engines scream, gears grind, the convoy lunges forward, leaving behind a furnace that once answered to a call sign. Night reclaims the road as though the explosion were a match blown out after lighting something far more dangerous. A creeping sense of being stalked digs claws into my back. I scan the horizon through NVGs and see only the fluorescent freckles of desert vegetation. Inside each shrub, my imagination plants a rifle barrel. The ridge narrows into what maps label a wadi, dry riverbed most days, makeshift highway tonight. The walls hem us close enough that turning around would be a ballet of metal and luck. Harrington chooses the Wadi because scouts cleared it last week and because Ambush Alley proper now feels like volunteering for execution. Moonlight has ducked behind clouds, lending the place the look of an X-ray. Everything bones, no flesh. Our tires slip on loose scree. Every skid squeals like a confession. Halfway through the Wadi, a pair of pickup trucks appears, parked nose to nose across the passage, headlights dead, doors askew. The tableau looks staged, elements placed with theatrical precision. We halt, engines idling angrily. I swing the turret to bear, red laser dots bob across fenders. Silence pools thick enough to drown the next breath, until a thin, high wail drifts from one cab. A child's cry, unmistakable in its rawness. The sound cleaves the distance, lands between duty and conscience, dares us to choose. Diaz whispers, "Could be wired." His words tremble, not from fear of death, we've rehearsed that, but from fear of living with a wrong choice. Harrington orders two-man recon. I volunteer because the cry has made my chest feel like a cracked bowl. Diaz curses, but follows. Loyalty can be a reckless tide. We advance in deliberate steps, rifles up, fingers already half compressing triggers. The air smells of diesel and wet sand, as though rain has ghosted these rocks sometime in the last hour. At 20 meters, a flare arcs overhead and bursts, drenching the Wadi in red that seems to thicken the shadows rather than banish them. My night vision goggles wash out. I rip them upward and glimpse 6 figures cresting the ridge, rifles raised, silhouettes devil-sharp against the flare's bloodlight. The child wails again, shorter this time, as if even fear has limits. Training collides with instinct. I pivot, plant a knee, sight center mass on the closest silhouette, and fire. Muzzle flash stabs the dark. Recoil hammers my shoulder. The ridge spits dust. Figures scatter. Diaz fires, then yells for the kid. I vault to the truck, yank open the door. A boy, no older than 8, stares up, cheeks tracked with tears thick as syrup. I scoop him out, feel his tiny ribs flutter against my armor. My free hand keeps the rifle leveled, barrel dancing between shadows that pop up and wilt. For 90 seconds the night is all strobes and concussions, angry light painting the Wadi in stop-motion tableaus. Here Diaz dragging the boy, there Harrington's silhouette framed in muzzle flare like a statue chiseled from sparks. Then the shooting fades, leaving only the rasp of our breathing and the child's hiccuped sobs. We sweep the ridge, blood trails slither into darkness, but no bodies remain to explain them. Back in the convoy, the boy sits rigid on the bench seat, clutching the scorched teddy bear I pulled from the blast site, as though it is the last thread to a life he's already slipped from. He will not meet my eyes, yet when Diaz presses a canteen to his lips, he drinks as if water itself were an apology. I glance at the empty spot where Ranger used to sprawl, head in my lap, during long drives. Tonight, that space is occupied by a child too shocked to speak. The trade feels both brutal and sacred. One small life for another. The calculus of survival, written in unfamiliar handwriting. Harrington gives the order to roll. Thunderheads gather low on the horizon, their bellies stitched with silent lightning. We push forward, tires shredding gravel. The engines growl the only music. Somewhere ahead, beyond ridges and storm clouds, and whatever traps wait, curled beneath the sand, Lights of our forward base flicker, distant, delicate, promising. And somewhere beyond that, Ranger dozes under white sheets, each breath a semaphore that repeats the message, "My heart seizes tonight." Keep moving. The story is not finished. Lightning forks across the horizon in blunt white spears, and the desert inhales as though deciding whether to drown us or simply rub us flat. We have been rolling almost 2 hours since the Wadi firefight, the rescued boy wedged between Diaz and a medic in the rear seat, his eyes stunned open and unblinking. The only pulse of color inside the truck is the charred teddy bear he clutches to his chest. Every time the wheels bang over a rut, a weak squeak leaks from the toy's half-melted belly, a strangled reminder that innocence sometimes survives fire by sheer accident. Ahead, a sheet of rain sweeps sideways, swallowing the lead vehicle, and a moment later, the storm slams into us hard enough to rattle bolts. The windshield becomes a cinema of hammered water. Wipers fling arcs that are instantly erased. NVGs smear. Headlights only illuminate the violent churn of droplets. In the turret, I wipe goggles with a sandy sleeve and taste metal on my tongue. The electric tang that drifts just before the sky tears itself open again. Another bolt strikes to our left, deafening, and the radios die in the same breath. No hiss, no carrier wave, just a vacuum that howls louder than static ever could. Harrington's map tablet flickers, goes black, then reboots to an error screen we cannot decode in the dark. 2 taps on the side panel, his signal to tighten column distance, reach us through taillight flashes. Diaz eases forward until our bumper nearly kisses the mudslinging tires of the truck ahead. The convoy crawls now, a fractured centipede feeling for the route by muscle memory alone, each vehicle trusting the next to know where the invisible spine of the road still hides beneath floodwater. The ridge that should guide us home is only an outline when lightning fires. Between flashes, we steer by the smell of wet gypsum and the deeper darkness where the embankment falls away. I call ranges, sweep the gun a slow arc, and try not to picture minds loosening from sand in the runoff, rolling like coins across a tilted table. Every new thunderclap seems to come from a different quarter, like artillery auditioning for the next barrage. Then the SAT antenna we patched after the first blast tears free. I hear it before I see it, a metallic shriek, a thud, and the sudden absence of its whip shadow beside the truck. It bounces once and vanishes under the column. Without it, we are ghosts. No signal out, no rescue in. Harrington's voice finally returns over the short-range intercom, brittle and clipped. "No comms. Push through." The order is equal parts strategy and prayer. Mud thickens and engines grunt at every shift, drinking fuel faster than the gauges can comfort. 30 miles remain, maybe less if we have strayed north of the intended track. Diaz's jaw flexes. The boy beside him dozes in fitful jerks, still buckled into a vest several sizes too large. I reach down, tuck the teddy bear's dangling arm back into his grasp, feel small fingers tighten reflexively. The movement cuts through the blur of rain, impossibly steady. I realize my own hand trembles harder than the child's. At mile marker, we guess, 15, the storm slackens to a spitting drizzle. The cloud shelf slides aside, and moonlight spills onto the desert like a fresh coat of frost. In that sudden clarity, the guard towers of our forward base materialize, silhouettes etched against a bruised dawn. They seem impossibly fragile, matchsticks balanced on a ridgeline, Yet the sight electrifies every cab in the convoy. Engines rev despite the mud. We surge the last stretch in a ragged sprint. A flare arcs from the nearest tower, green, friendly welcome, and moments later the gate yawns open. As we roll under the floodlights, I taste air that doesn't carry the metallic aftersmell of danger. Medics swarm the column before parking brakes hiss. They peel casualties from benches, slide stretchers onto gurneys, and vanish toward the aid station with practiced choreography. Diaz hops down, rainwater streaking grime from his face, and someone leads the boy away, cradling the bear like a passport. I stand in the turret a moment longer, letting the base's sodium lamps bleach the night vision from my retinas, until the adrenaline finally caves and my muscles begin to shake. I dismount and almost stumble, legs remembering suddenly that they have balanced a gun and armor for hours. Harrington claps my shoulder once, the touch both thank you and dismissal, then strides toward the command bunker, radio handset all ready to his ear, though the antenna stump dangles uselessly behind him. Work never stops. It only relocates. The veterinary tent glows at the far edge of the medical compound, its fabric walls pulsing with generator light. I pretend I have official business there and nobody questions me. Inside, disinfectant lingers over the dampness, clean, sharp, foreign to the rest of the base. Ranger lies on a raised cot, flank-shaved, fresh sutures zigzagging like railroad track across tawny fur. A clear tube feeds antibiotics into his foreleg. Another drains pink fluid from a pouch at his hip. He sees me, or maybe just hears the boot fall, and lifts his head half an inch. The tail tip begins to brush the canvas, tentative, as if testing whether happiness is permitted here. I crouch until my knees pop, slide a hand beneath his ear, and feel warmth that has nothing to do with fevers or desert heat. His eyes track mine, dark and steady. The vet, a captain with hands too gentle for combat boots, steps beside me, murmurs that Ranger will limp in cold weather but should chase anything with wheels in a month. The relief comes so sudden my lungs forget how to pace themselves, and for several seconds I fight the urge to sit on the floor and sob, like the child who rode through gunfire with a burnt toy. A ripple of applause breaks outside, soldiers marking the flag raising that accompanies every dawn, ceremony even war refuses to cancel. I thank the captain, stand, almost salute, and stop myself. Ranger's eyelids drift halfway closed as the morphine tugs him back toward sleep. Before leaving, I unclip one of my spare cloth patches, unit insignia faded by too many washings, and tuck it beneath his paw. A totem, I tell myself, so he remembers the shape of home until I can carry him there for real. Stepping into the morning air, I find Diaz smoking beneath a tarp, rain easing to a mist that beads on his ash helmet. He offers the cigarette, and I decline, but the gesture alone is enough to level us. We watch the sky bloom orange behind the towers, watch the medics wheel stretchers through mud that already crusts into new dust. In the hush between gusts, I hear the bass loudspeaker crackle, announcing a memorial service for 3 names I recognize, but cannot yet allow inside. Grief has its own convoy speed. Tonight, it must wait. I think of the child, now safe in an infirmary cot with Coco by his hand, and of Ranger breathing 60 beats per minute beneath white canvas. 2 small lives orbit the cratered heart of this mission, plotting trajectories none of us could program. Their survival feels less like a victory than a lease, One more sunrise granted, interest accruing. Debt like that cannot be repaid in full, only honored by continuing. Diaz flicks ash, squints at me. "We still flying him stateside?" he asks. I nod before the question is truly formed. "Then we better get some orders cut," he says, as if paperwork could seal a promise. I picture Ranger at home, chasing a ball across a yard he's never seen, scars puckering each stride, and I realize the yard is as imaginary for me as for him. Yet I run after it anyway. Thunder mumbles far off, the storm's final opinion. I square my shoulders toward the operations office and start walking, boots leaving prints that the rising sun begins to dry. Behind me, on the other side of a canvas wall, Ranger's tail thumps once, steady as a metronome, calling the next movement to attention. The hours after a firefight are strangely bureaucratic. Forms sprout faster than shell casings, and each blank square demands the exact geometry of chaos. I sit opposite Colonel Duval in a prefab office that still smells of plywood and sun-baked glue, recounting coordinates, calibers, casualty counts. Behind him, the generator hiccups and the ceiling fan stalls mid-rotation, blades caught like a breath held too long. When we reached the moment Diaz and I left the convoy to pull a crying child from a booby-trapped truck, the colonel lowers his pen. "Why divert?" he asks without malice, only arithmetic. Lives risked, objectives delayed, figures that must reconcile. I hear myself answer, "Because Ranger would've." The words land between us, embarrassingly simple. A line of fatigue cracks Duval's expression. He writes it down exactly, dots the period, and we move on. In that small gesture, I glimpse the war's secret engine. Decisions weighted by things that do not fit columns. Loyalty, hunches, the memory of a dog's unblinking faith. Outside, morning advances on the compound, softening shadows into something almost domestic. A cargo plane waits on the dirt strip, ramp yawning like a promise. Ranger's crate, olive plastic punched with air holes, sits on a dolly near the tail. Someone has stenciled "priority" in red across the lid, the paint still tacky. The rescued boy, Sammy, stands nearby wrapped in a blanket 2 sizes too big, clutching his scorched teddy the way a diver palms the last valve of oxygen. A flight nurse kneels to adjust his sling, speaking Arabic so gentle it sounds like river water. Diaz and I ratchet tie-downs into the hold, metal teeth biting straps with satisfying finality. He thumbs a smear of grease across his cheek, then wipes it away, sheepish. "Dog's flying private again," he says. "He's earning loyalty miles," I reply. Humor tastes foreign on my tongue, but the smile it pulls from Diaz feels real enough to keep. Ranger watches us through the crate door, pupils steady despite the hum of turbines spooling. His flank is a quilt of fresh pink and older white scars, but his ears flick at every voice, reading moods the way some men read sky signs. I crouch, slide fingers through the grate. Warm breath fogs the plastic. "Stateside lawn, buddy," I whisper. "Green grass, no thorns." He noses my knuckle, silent oath exchanged. The loadmaster signals 2 minutes to roll. I lift Sammy onto the ramp. He weighs almost nothing, yet my arms tremble with the responsibility. Inside, the fuselage yawns cavernous, a cathedral built for cargo and wounded hope. As the nurse guides him to a jump seat, the boy's gaze flickers to Ranger, and something inside him unclenches. He lifts the teddy so the dog can see, A wordless introduction. Ranger thumps his tail once, formal enough to seal friendship. When the engines surge to full, Diaz taps his helmet against mine, field farewell, and descends the ramp. I stay until the door seals, until the aircraft becomes its own universe, pulling away from the landing lights, its belly carrying two survivors whose futures were never written into any operations order. The moment the drone fades, the runway feels larger, emptier, as if a piece of gravity lifted with the plane. The sun is higher when I finally shower, yet the water cannot rinse the iron tang of burned wiring from my hair. I trade armor for fatigues that still smell of bleach and depot warehouse dust. At the mess tent, I pour coffee into a dented mug, black as bitumen, steam coiling in the cool air. The compound has quieted to the low thrum of generators and distant hammer blows, signs of people mending something they still believe worth keeping upright. I carry the mug to a folding chair beside the blast wall, choosing a spot where dawn's glare slides off corrugated metal and makes the world a little less sharp. The first sip scalds. Pain anchors me in the present, refuses the drift toward grisly reels that spool behind my eyelids. Across the yard, a flag lifts on its cable, nylon snapping once, then settling into a steady ripple. 3 body bags rest on litters beneath a tarp nearby, attendants waiting for transport. I force myself to read each tag: Hartley, Singh, Alvarez, names that just yesterday answered, "Here, sir," now inked in block letters meant for archives. A gust rocks the tarp, and I imagine the cold fabric brushing their boots one last time. Memory photographs everything. My duty is not to misplace the album. Harrington approaches, boots crunching coated gravel. His voice stays low. Brigade has authorized our request. Ranger and Sammy will continue to the main airfield, then board a MedCon flight bound ultimately for the States. Paperwork's ugly but signed, he says. Pentagon wants a feel-good story. I bite back cynicism. Sometimes motives don't matter, so long as outcomes bend the right way. Harrington studies the steam rising from my mug. "All that for a mutt and a kid," he murmurs, not a question. "All that," I echo. The silence afterward is comfortable. Rank may separate us on rosters, but fatigue levels distinctions until all that remains are 2 people waiting for their hands to stop trembling. He leaves for yet another briefing, and I imagine him reciting grid references to officers who will never taste sand blown sideways by helicopter rotors. I drain the last of the coffee, grounds thick at the bottom like unspoken truth, then walk to the media tent where a single camera waits, lens ringed by dust. The public affairs sergeant cues me. Headquarters wants first-hand footage before memory blurs details. The room smells of stale air conditioner coolant and plastic sheeting, but the red tally light flicks on, and suddenly I am speaking to an unseen audience who will watch this months later on bright, safe screens. I recount the ambush, the rescue, the boys' silent terror, Ranger's stitched flank. Words flow measured, but midway something shifts. I stop reading the prepared notes and lock eyes with the lens. "If a stray dog can take shrapnel meant for us," I say, voice thinning, "can ride a med-evac alone and still wag his tail when he wakes, maybe there's more to courage than any uniform can claim. Maybe love's real genius is racing ahead to scout a path when the rest of us are too weighted to move." A tech raises 2 fingers. "Wrap it." I finish simply, "Tell me about the Ranger in your story. I'm listening." The light clicks off. In the hush that follows, the tent fabric flutters like distant applause. By dusk, maintenance crews torch-weld new antenna mounts, sparks stippling the blue hour. I sit again with another mug, tea this time bittersweet, watching arcs of orange fall like meteor showers. The ground smells of ozone and turned earth. Somewhere overhead, another helicopter thuds toward the front, blades beating ancient war drums. I trace its path until it fades into the star-littered dark, then lower my gaze. Near the veterinary tent, a young private cleans instruments under a bare bulb. Each motion is deliberate, reverent. I picture Ranger tomorrow, easing from his crate, paws testing concrete, ears twitching at the foreign hush of an American medical ward. I picture Sammy gripping the dog's fur in the cargo hold, turbulence rocking them both toward sleep. These visions are fragile, but faith often enters through cracks war cannot mortar shut. I slip a half-dog tag from my pocket, thumb its scarred edge, and breathe the name that once rang roll call beside mine. The tag is warm now, alive in my hand, proof that stories outlive the people who spark them. So, I'm asking you, yes, you on the other side of this screen, to keep that spark moving. Think of the Ranger in your own life, the scrappy soul, man, woman, or mutt, who dragged you through a firefight you didn't think you'd survive. Drop their name or a single line about them in the comments below, and let this place become a wall of living roll calls we can all lean on. If you felt the tail thump of hope in this story, ride shotgun with me again. Hit subscribe, ring the bell, and I'll save you a seat on the next patrol through memory and meaning. Until then, I square my shoulders toward the glow of welding torches, an orchestra tuning for the dawn, and step forward, one print at a time, grateful you're now marching beside me.